24 hours from now, the results will be pouring in and we'll be trying to make sense of them. So let's look at the different races on the ballot with our expert roundtable. Joining us tonight is Kevin Griffith, the vice chair of the Sarasota Democratic Party, Rod Thompson, the president of the Sarasota Republican Club, and Zach Anderson, the political editor of the Sarasota Herald Tribune, and a very busy young man these days. The hottest race must be the state Senate race because you have so many high-profile Republicans running and an unexpected Democratic primary. And I'm wondering what you folks take are of the Republican side of things, because obviously you have Doug Holder and Greg Steube, who in the latest polling are running neck and neck. It's a really tight race. Any predictions who's going to come up on top?
I can tell you who the winner is going to be, the political advertisers in this race. I think it's probably one of the most expensive state Senate races, if not the most expensive state Senate race in a long time.
What's so much shocking is how much Political Action Committee money has poured in on those races, and I just saw an ad before Greg Steube being hammered about the Enterprise Florida situation, and that seems like to be the dividing lines there.
Yeah, and they're all really hitting each other. Nobody's hands are really clean in this race. You see all of them have their allies and their political action committees who have really gone negative. That just shows how close this race really is. They all are kind of, there's three candidates: Nora Patterson, former county commissioner; Greg Steube, state representative; and former state representative Doug Holder, who all seem to be kind of close, clustered near each other. And then State Representative Ray Pilon is also in the mix there. And they all kind of, there's only so much they can do to pump themselves up. They obviously feel like they have to knock the other ones down too.
Well, I think the point that I would make on some of the negative advertising is, unfortunately, it's because it works. And we know this across parties, it works. And so when you have a close race like this, campaigns often spend their own money promoting the positive persona of their candidates, and then PACs go negative and attack the other. So the negative campaigning really works well for the middle voters. Those that are on one side or the other generally know who they're going to vote for, and they're fairly informed. Probably people watching tonight are fairly well informed, but there's going to be a chunk of people that will go out and vote, and they can be persuaded by negative advertising on TV and in flyers, and unfortunate.
What's interesting there is you have two very conservative candidates, in Holder and Steube, and against two relatively moderate Republicans in terms of Nora Patterson and Ray Pilon. Does that kind of cancel each other out?
No, I don't think so, because I think you see that it's probably going to come down to, the predictions long have been it will probably be between Steube and Holder right at the end there, and those are the more conservative ones. And Nora has great name recognition. You know, Ray does too, particularly in Northern County. But it's hard to see it not being one of those two, and that's probably because it is a right of center, even Republican-wise.
And we should also mention Rick Levine, who has not gotten a lot of press, but he's also in this race. And I'm interested in what the dynamic will be in terms of the Democratic side of things, depending on who wins the Republican side. If it's Holder or Steube who are more conservative, does that in any way help the Democrat who comes out of that primary?
Well, I think the issues are what helps the Democrat the most, because they'll be right on the issues. But the more conservative the candidate that comes out, and I think it's likely to be one of the most conservative, the more that will help the winner tomorrow on the Democratic side for sure. And I think there will be more money coming in that general elections.
But it's not a seat that the Florida Democratic Party has really targeted.
Not yet, but I think depending on the outcome tomorrow, it very well could be. There's certainly money out there this year.
And Zach, what do you make of the Democratic side of the race? You have Frank Alcock, who is a well-known political science professor and who is our ABC political analyst, against a guy who just graduated from college just a couple of months ago, Frank Cirillo.
Yeah, it's really interesting that the Democrats even have a primary. This is a seat that leans Republican. Democrats often really don't have competitive primaries around here. They sometimes struggle to get one qualified candidate to run for offices that typically lean Republican, let alone two. And both of these candidates are fairly credible candidates. They're both well-spoken, smart candidates, but Alcock has raised more money. Cirillo is just out of college, but a lot of people I've talked to, even Republicans, have been impressed that he's basically been able to hold his own at these candidate forums. But I think in the end, Alcock being able to put out a few mailers is probably going to put him over the top, but who knows?
And with his experience, too, that really makes a difference. He's well known and well respected as far as knowing the issues and policies and that sort of thing. And the other Frank is just brand new. Great experience for him, but it's hard to see him really actually beating Alcock.
Well, does the particular dynamics from this year, with a very competitive presidential race and a maximum turnout in terms of Democrats and Republicans, would that help, let's say, Frank Alcock, should he pull it out, if he's going up against one of the more conservative Republicans?
I don't think so, because I'm not sure that the premise, I would agree with the premise, that I think that the turnout, Trump has brought a ton of new voters in. So the question is, how good is the turnout going to be among the traditional Republican voters? Because I think you're going to get a lot of new voters on the Trump ticket, on the Trump side there. I don't know that Hillary Clinton is inspiring on the Democrat side, like, say, President Obama definitely inspired hugely in 2008. And without Hillary being able to do that, I don't know that that's where the momentum is on turnout.
Let me counter that just briefly. If you look at the numbers so far of people who have voted, because a lot of people have already voted by mail or early voted, the percent of votes in so far, the Democrats have a larger percent. Now, not a total, because there's more Republicans in the county, but that's showing there is motivation for the Democrats. And I would also kind of go against that premise as well, in the sense that I don't necessarily think a large turnout benefits one side or the other this year, because I'm not so sure new Trump voters are loyal to the Republican Party all the way down the ticket.
It's an interesting point, because there was an article in Politico today saying those new Republican voters are old Democratic voters who have in reality not voted Democrat for many years now.
Yeah, there's been kind of mixed reporting on really how many new voters Trump is really bringing into the process. If you talk to Democrats, I mean, their big hope, one of the things that they're really looking at this election cycle is they think, Trump, based on some of his controversies, could really crater towards the end, and that'll pull down other Republicans, lower down ballot Republicans. But I tend to agree with Rod as well that Clinton, there's a big question about whether she can get the enthusiasm and turnout that somebody like Obama did.
We have just a couple of seconds left here, but I'm wondering if anybody is kind of shocked in terms of Joe Gruder's race here. He is in a very close primary right now against
Steve Vernon.
Steve Vernon, and even some of Joe's friends saying this is going to be tough for him to
I think
pull out.
this is the most surprising local race of the year. Steve Vernon, who wasn't known at all really, but has been active kind of behind the scenes. He was president of Tea Party Manatee. He's president of Lakewood Ranch Republican Club. He's independently wealthy. He decides that he's going to challenge Joe Gruders. People thought that Gruders was going to walk into this race. He raised a lot of money and he's well known.
I am only a little bit surprised, because Joe is well known by some, but Steve is very well known and respected. I'm friends of both of them, and Steve has been known for many years now and is well respected within the party.
Okay, we'll have to leave it there. We'll take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll hear what Sarasota's supervisor of elections is saying about voter turnout for the primary in our expert interview. Welcome back to the new hour-long version of ABC 7 at 7. If you're just joining us, we're talking about Florida's August primary. Tomorrow is primary day, and our panel is here to make sense of the different races. We are joined by Kevin Griffith, the vice chair of the Sarasota County Democratic Party, Rod Thompson, president of the Sarasota Republican Club, and Zach Anderson, the political editor for the Sarasota Herald Tribune. Let's talk about the U.S. Senate race, because it was really turned on its head when Marco Rubio jumped back into the fray. We were in some uncharted waters before that, and we had, Carlos Baruf, our own Manatee County home builder, who was in a pretty strong position before Rubio got into the race, with a lot of other Republicans who were fairly unknown statewide. But when Rubio, and most of them jumped out, Baruf stayed in, and Rubio, according to the latest polls, is substantially up against Carlos Baruf. What do we all make of this race?
I think that, first of all, I was a little bit surprised that Carlos stayed in, but knowing him, it is part of his personality, too, because he's that, Cuban immigrant fighter sort of thing and all, and he's not going to give up when everybody else left.
But was he banking on the fact that during the presidential race, there was so much talk about the fact that Rubio really did not pay attention to the state over the last 6 years, and that a lot of people were resentful of that, and that maybe that would bite him.
I think he thought that he could use that and that he could attach himself to Trump with the popularity, because Trump beat Rubio in the state pretty handily, really. And I think those two things he thought with his money could help him be very competitive with Rubio. It doesn't look like it's turned out that way, but I think that's what he was thinking, and a little bit of just never give up in him.
I want to show you all something very interesting. I interviewed Carlos Baruf on this broadcast a couple of months ago, and we talked about him skipping out on a Republican debate in South Florida, and this is what he had to say. Is it important for you to debate your Republican challengers?
When there's somebody worth debating. At this point, I don't think there is any.
Wouldn't it be useful for Republican voters in Florida to see you on stage with the other candidates for the U.S. Senate?
At the appropriate time, I'm sure we will have that opportunity.
So it is just a little bit ironic that Marco Rubio never debated Carlos Baruf. Any surprises there, Zach?
No, not at all. There's no incentive for Rubio to debate Baruf. It really just gives Baruf some publicity and raises his profile, and his profile is fairly low. I mean, if you look at the poll digits, or maybe 10-12%. So for Rubio, it just made absolute sense to ignore him, and maybe it made sense for Baruf at the time to ignore his other opponents. And when I asked him, are you mad that Rubio didn't debate you, because he's kind of taken some shots at him and said you're a coward, you should debate me. And he kind of acknowledged that it's kind of how the game is played, and that it doesn't behoove Rubio to debate him.
And Baruf has said that he will not be running for another office. Do we believe him?
Well, he sort of said that. I mean, he's kind of held the door open. He said that I'm running for the Senate now, and I'm not going to think about the presidential race. But I think most people expect him to run for president again.
Kevin, let me ask you about the Democratic side. Patrick Murphy, the congressman from the West Palm Beach area, against Alan Grayson, the bombastic congressman from Orlando. That's an understatement. There has not been a lot of polling on the Democratic side of that. The last poll I saw was Murphy up by 8 points. I know Alan Grayson is fond of saying his supporters would walk over hot coals to vote for him, but he has been banged around a lot with stories about his personal life and stories about an ethics investigation. Do you think that Murphy is safe there, or Grayson could come out on top?
No, I think... I don't have any insight beyond just general, but I think Patrick Murphy's probably pretty safe there.
And the polls that I've seen in terms of the comparison between Grayson or Murphy versus Rubio, Rubio still wins against both Democrats, but it's a substantially closer race if it's Murphy against Rubio.
And that makes sense, because Grayson is much further left than Murphy is. And so I'm kind of heartened to see that the Democrats don't look like they'll probably nominate Grayson. I mean, he's over there a ways. But in a general election, that makes Murphy a much more competitive, I think, candidate for the Democrats against Rubio.
And Kevin, the Democrats put a lot of hope and money behind Patrick Murphy. I mean, he was helped along and endorsed by the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee. Harry Reid actually told Alan Grayson, "I hope you lose." But he has not exactly lit the world on fire. There was stories about him padding his educational record and his business record. He was the fair-haired boy, and it really did not turn out that way.
Well, I think it may very well still turn out that way. I've met Patrick many times. He's a very intelligent guy. He is a CPA. It was a hit piece put on by the Republicans.
But he is not licensed in the state of Florida.
No, he's licensed in Colorado. But, I mean, he's still a CPA. He still has that credential. He's still intelligent enough to be a CPA. He also did own a company. It's just...
That didn't do very much business.
Well, it participated, or it was also run by his father. But at the same time, I mean, he has credentials. He's been a two-term congressman, defeated Alan West. He's very capable. I mean, he's a young guy. He's 35 years old or 36 years old. I think he's going to be more formidable than people may assume.
Zach, your take?
I think there are a lot of questions surrounding him. The Democratic establishment really did get behind him. Obama, Vice President Biden, everybody has really rallied behind him. And, you know, he is a very young guy, and he's very untested. You know, he's never run for a statewide office. And some of these allegations did come out, some of the questions about his background, and it'll be interesting to see whether he can kind of move beyond that. But I think at this point, you have somebody like Rubio, who's been on the national stage, who's debated, who's obviously very eloquent, and somebody like Murphy, who's a lot more untested. You have to give the edge to Rubio.
And you got to say that Marco Rubio does have his detractors and some hits on him, including his attendance record in the U.S. Senate while he was running for president, and some of those lingering resentments about how little he's actually been around the state over 6 years
and I'm sure the winner of the Democrat party, you know, the candidate for them, will end up attacking him on those points. Those are probably his only real weak points, and they will probably attack him on there, maybe some policy differences. But, you know, when you're looking for an election win, it'll be on those points. I would say that in Murphy's case, those were mainstream newspaper stories about him and his business, and he beat Alan West after redistricting changed the district.
And I want to get briefly to our local congressional race, the two Democrats vying against Vern Buchanan and you know, Jan Schneider has run several times before. She is up against Brent King, an airline pilot who is very well spoken and an intelligent man. Neither has really raised a lot of money.
No, but they're both very qualified, and that's going to be an interesting one to see who pulls that out. Jan's been on the ballot several times. Brent King's a very impressive guy, like you said, an airline pilot, and quite articulate on the issues. It's going to be interesting.
Zach, does either one have a chance, even in a year where a presidential year where Democratic turnout is going to be high?
Never say never, but I think the Buchanan is the overwhelming favorite. This looks to be pretty much of a dud of a race at this point. Jan Snyder is sort of the definition of a perennial candidate. She keeps running, she keeps losing. Brent King hasn't raised any money. He isn't known at all. So whoever emerges from that is really not expected to be a very strong candidate against Buchanan.
What impact will congressional redistricting have on this? Because this is not the same seat that, I mean, it extends into Hillsborough County.
It's not, but so it used to be all of Sarasota County and all of Manatee County. Now the district is all of Manatee County, the northern half of Sarasota County, and the southern portion of Hillsborough County. So you basically swap southern Sarasota County for the southern sliver of Hillsborough County, and that's still very conservative voters in southern Hillsborough County. I think the numbers I saw are pretty similar to the way the district was before, so I still think it leans Republican by a pretty good amount.
So what does Vern Buchanan do? Does he debate his Democratic challenger, or does he do what, you know, what Rubio did to Baruf, and you ignore your opponent if they're that far behind in the polls?
If you're his campaign manager, what you do is you look at the polls. And if it's a huge difference, I mean, the reason Rubio did this, and everybody does it on either side, is that if there's a huge difference and your guy is way ahead, there is no upside to debating whatsoever. So if he's way ahead of either Jan Schneider or the other guy running, then there's no purpose in him.
The one upside, I mean, excuse me for interrupting, but the one upside would be you'd actually talk about the issues that impact your constituents' lives.
Well, that's wonderful, but it doesn't add a seat to the Congress. And I have talked to both candidates, and they're out there, and they are, you know, they are talking to Democratic voters. They're talking to people in the African American community and the Hispanic community, but without really substantial funds. How do you reach the voter who is not really a strong Democrat or Republican, but is out there trying to listen?
Well, after the primary, whoever wins that is going to have enough money to get their message out. I would say this: look for Vern Buchanan to underperform his past numbers, even if it's a, quote, dud of a race, as you guys have said.
Well, he barely won his first.
Welcome back. We are speaking with our roundtable about tomorrow's primary election. Now our guests are Kevin Griffith, the Vice Chair of the Sarasota County Democratic Party, Rod Thompson, President of the Sarasota Republican Club, and Zach Anderson, the political editor for the Sarasota Herald Tribune. Final thoughts, Zach.
Well, I think this state Senate race is the most fascinating one in our area, and it's the one that I'll be watching most closely. It's the most crowded state Senate race in the entire state, with 5 Republicans and 2 Democrats running, and one of the most expensive and nastiest. And I think it'll really take the temperature of the local GOP. This seat has been held by a moderate Republican for going back decades. Nancy Dieter is considered fairly moderate. She's the one leaving. And you have 2 more conservative candidates, 2 more moderate Republican candidates. And so, you know, depending on who emerges there, I think that'll really say which direction the local GOP is going.
I agree. That's the key race to watch tomorrow. I mean, there's a lot of important races, but that's probably the key race to watch, because not only does it take the temperature of the GOP, but it also sets up the general election in November. And I personally think that the winner of it is going to emerge strong, because they're going to have such name recognition already coming out of the primary and all. And I think that they're going to be well situated to be able to unite the local party behind them moving into the general.
I got to ask about the Joe Gruters race. If it does not go his way, what does that say?
Well, that would be a shocker if it doesn't go his way. But what it would really say is that Steve Vernon did a heck of a ground game going door-to-door knocking. That he's knocked on thousands of doors.
And touching on door-to-door and local campaigns in Northport, there's 3 races up at the city commission level, and Rhonda DeFranco is the sitting vice mayor. And I know she's been knocking on doors and running very hard, and there's been an anti-push against her coming from the Republican side, even though it's a nonpartisan race. And I think Rhonda's going to come out on top.
What campaign, what race are you most excited about?
The state senate race is going to be interesting because on both sides, you know, I like primaries. And I think we have a primary on both sides, and someone will come out and we'll move forward to the general.
All right, gentlemen, thank you very much. We want to take a moment to share some of the comments from our viewers about Friday's show. We told you about Amendment 4, which gives tax breaks to those who install solar panels. Here is what some of you are saying about the amendment. Rachel Roberts-Bethel writes, "No to Amendment 1 and yes to Amendment 4. Clean energy is the future and solar is the way to go. Solar energy will bring back many jobs to Florida. It's a no-brainer in my opinion." John Beavers writes, "It is beyond stupid to penalize people using clean alternative energy and protect the big corporations." And Tracy Dietrich writes, "I am voting yes on 4 and no on 1. I appreciate you bringing clarity to this very important issue." I want to thank our guests for being here tonight. Kevin Griffith is the Vice Chair of the Sarasota County Democratic Party. Rod Thompson, the President of the Sarasota Republican Club. And Zach Anderson, Politics Editor for the Sarasota Herald Tribune.